Dead Souls, Part 1, Chapter 4, Section 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dead Souls, by Nikolai Vasilievich Gogol. Translated by D.J. Hogarth. Part 1, Chapter 4, Section 2. To continue, the three vehicles bowled up to the steps of Nozdrev's house, and their occupants alighted. But no preparations whatsoever had been made for the guests' reception, for on some wooden trestles in the centre of the dining-room a couple of peasants were engaged in whitewashing the ceiling and drawling out an endless song as they splashed their stuff about the floor. Hastily bidding peasants and trestles to be gone, Nozdrev departed to another room with further instructions. Indeed, so audible was the sound of his voice as he ordered dinner that Chichikov, who was beginning to feel hungry once more, was unable to gather that it would be at least 5 o'clock before a meal of any kind would be available. On his return, Nozdrev invited his companions to inspect his establishment, even though as early as 2 o'clock he had to announce that nothing more was to be seen. The tour began with a view of the stables, where the party saw 2 mares, the one a grey and the other a roan, and a colt, which latter animal, though far from showy, Nozdrev declared to have cost him 10,000 roubles. "You never paid 10,000 roubles for the brute!" exclaimed the brother-in-law. "He isn't worth even 1,000. "By God, I did pay 10,000, asserted Nozdrev. "You can swear that as much as you like," retorted the other. "Will you bet that I did not?" asked Nozdrev, but the brother-in-law declined the offer. Next, Nozdrev showed his guests some empty stalls where a number of equally fine animals, so he alleged, had lately stood. Also there was on view the goat, which an old belief still considers to be an indispensable adjunct to such places, even though its apparent use is to pace up and down beneath the noses of the horses, as though the place belonged to it. Thereafter the host took his guests to look at a young wolf which he had got tied to a chain. "He is fed on nothing but raw meat," he explained, "for I want him to grow up as fierce as possible." Then the party inspected a pond in which there were fish of such a size that it would take 2 men all their time to lift one of them out. This piece of information was received with renewed incredulity on the part of the brother-in-law. "Now, Chichikov," went on Nozdrev, "let me show you a truly magnificent brace of dogs. The hardness of their muscles will surprise you, and they have jowls as sharp as needles." So saying, he led the way to a small but neatly built shed surrounded on every side with a fenced-in run. Entering this run, the visitors beheld a number of dogs, of all sorts and sizes and colours. In their midst, Nozdrev looked like a father lording it over his family circle. Erecting their tails, their stems, as dog fanciers call those members, the animals came bounding to greet the party, and fully a score of them laid their paws upon Chichikov's shoulders. Indeed, one dog was moved with such friendliness that, standing on its hind legs, it licked him on the lips, and so forced him to spit. That done, the visitors duly inspected the couple already mentioned, and expressed astonishment at their muscles. True enough, they were fine animals. Next, the party looked at a Crimean bitch, which, though blind and fast nearing her end, had, 2 years ago, been a truly magnificent dog. At all events, so said Nozdrev. Next came another bitch, also blind. Then an inspection of the water-mill, which lacked the spindle socket wherein the upper stone ought to have been revolving, fluttering, to use the Russian peasant's quaint expression. "But never mind," said Nozdrev, "let us proceed to the blacksmith's shop." So to the blacksmith's shop the party proceeded, and when the said shop had been viewed, Nozdrev said as he pointed to a field, "In this field I have seen such numbers of hares as to render the ground quite invisible. Indeed, on one occasion I, with my own hands, caught a hare by the hind legs." "You never caught a hare by the hind legs with your hands," remarked the brother-in-law. "But I did," reiterated Nozdrev. "However, let me show you the boundary where my lands come to an end." So saying, he started to conduct his guests across a field which consisted mostly of mole-heaps, and in which the party had to pick their way between strips of ploughed land and of harrowed. Soon Chichikov began to feel weary, for the train was so low-lying that in many spots water could be heard squelching underfoot. And though for a while the visitors watched their feet and stepped carefully, they soon perceived that such a course availed them nothing, and took to following their noses, without either selecting or avoiding the spots where the mire happened to be deeper, or the reverse. At length, when a considerable distance had been covered, they caught sight of a boundary post and a narrow ditch. "That is the boundary," said Nozdrev. "Everything that you see on this side of the post is mine, as well as the forest on the other side of it, and what lies beyond the forest." "When did that forest become yours?" asked the brother-in-law. "It cannot be long since you purchased it, for it never used to be yours." "Yes, it isn't long since I purchased it," said Nozdrev. "How long?" "How long? Why, I purchased it 3 days ago, and gave a pretty sum for it, as the devil knows." "Indeed?" "Why, 3 days ago you were at the fair." "Wiseacre, cannot one be at a fair and buy land at the same time? Yes, I was at the fair, and my steward bought the land in my absence." "Oh, your steward bought it." The brother-in-law seemed doubtful, and shook his head. The guests returned by the same route as that by which they had come, whereafter, on reaching the house, Nozdrev conducted them to his study, which contained not a trace of the things usually to be found in such apartments, such things as books and papers. On the contrary, the only articles to be seen were a sword and a brace of guns, the one of them worth 300 roubles, and the other about 800. The brother-in-law inspected the articles in question, and then shook his head as before. Next, the visitors were shown some real Turkish daggers, of which one bore the inadvertent inscription, "Saveli Sibiryakov," #2, Master Cutler. Then came a barrel organ, on which Nozdrev started to play some tune or other. For a while the sounds were not wholly unpleasing, but suddenly something seemed to go wrong, for a mazurka started, to be followed by "Marlborough has gone to the war," and to this again there succeeded an antiquated waltz. Also, long after Nozdrev had ceased to turn the handle, one particularly shrill-pitched pipe, which had throughout refused to harmonize with the rest, kept up a protracted whistling on its own account. Then followed an exhibition of tobacco pipes, pipes of clay, of wood, of meerschaum, pipes smoked and non-smoked, pipes wrapped in cami leather and not so wrapped, an amber-mounted hookah, a stake won at cards, and a tobacco pouch, worked, it was alleged, by some countess who had fallen in love with Nozdrev at a post-house, and whose handiwork Nozdrev averred to constitute the sublimity of superfluity, a term which, in the Nozdrevian vocabulary, purported to signify the acme of perfection. #2. That is to say, a distinctly Russian name. Finally, after some hors d'oeuvres of sturgeon's back, they sat down to table, the time being then nearly 5 o'clock. But the meal did not constitute by any means the best of which Chichikov had ever partaken, seeing that some of the dishes were overcooked, and others were scarcely cooked at all. Evidently their compounder had trusted chiefly to inspiration. She had laid hold of the first thing which had happened to come to hand. For instance, had pepper represented the nearest article within reach, she had added pepper wholesale. Had a cabbage chanced to be so encountered, she had pressed it also into service, and the same with milk, bacon, and peas. In short, her rule seemed to have been, make a hot dish of some sort, and some sort of taste will result. For the rest, Nozdrev drew heavily upon the wine. Even before the soup had been served, he had poured out for each guest a bumper of port and another of hot sauterne. Never in provincial towns is ordinary vulgar sauterne ever procurable. Next he called for a bottle of Madeira, as fine a tipple as ever a field marshal drank. But the Madeira only burnt the mouth, since the dealers, familiar with the taste of our landed gentry, who love good Madeira, invariably doctor the stuff with copious dashes of rum and imperial vodka, in the hope that Russian stomachs will thus be enabled to carry off the lot. After this bottle, Nozdrev called for another, and a very special brand, a brand which he declared to consist of a blend of Burgundy and champagne, and of which he poured generous measures into the glasses of Chichikov and the brother-in-law as they sat to the right and left of him. But since Chichikov noticed that, after doing so, he added only a scanty modicum of the mixture to his own tumbler, our hero determined to be cautious.